Hey guys, it's BenTbeyondrepair here. Just logged into the client and saw that there is a dev blog. So the topic I wanted to talk about today was actually going to be about a recommendation and a change that I think Riot should make to help with normal matchmaking. So, we're going to watch this dev blog and give my first impressions of it, my reaction to it, and see if the topic I wanted to talk about ties into it. That would be nice. If not, I'll just say my piece on that at the end. So let's take a look and see what Riot's cooking up this time.
Hey folks, I'm Andre, also known as Meddler.
And I'm Paul, aka Probro, the newish EP for League. Today is Thursday, August 8th, so as usual, anything that happens after today won't be covered.
Now, for this dev update, we'll be doing something a little different. We don't have a lot of, really chunky new topics to share, so we're going to be answering some questions we've received from many of you instead. We'll be back with a regular dev update in September though.
So, let's get started.
Okay, so question for you, Paul.
Okay.
From a player in North America. I've been playing Swarm since its release. Will it be permanent? What about Arena?
All right. At the time of this recording, you have all spent over
I don't care
49
about
million
Swarm or
hours fighting
Arena.
the Primordians.
Sorry.
We saw a lot of good player feedback, taking notes for future modes, especially from players looking for ways to play League outside of Summoner's Rift. We want to replicate all the fun and success of Swarm in new modes in the future, so thank you for playing. We haven't decided on Arena's future yet, but we'll be able to talk more about it in our State of Modes update, which includes coverage of Swarm, Arena, ARAM, and the future of modes in general in our next update. All right, so let's go on to this question from Korea. Streamers are having their games sniped by people looking to manipulate the game's outcome. What are you doing to fix this?
So we do not condone this abuse, and we're serious about fixing it. We've just shipped some changes in patch 14.15 to make the penalty for declining queues more severe. First penalty now starts at 2 declines instead of 4, leads to a 5-minute suspension, that then ramps up to 30 minutes and then 12 hours. We want to see how this change lands. We're certainly open to additional changes to how the decline functionality works if needs be, but there are some trade-offs from those to things like increasing time to get into game, or putting AFK players into lobbies, making those eventually get reset when they auto-dodge. So, keeping a close eye on the problem, open to further changes if needs be, but there's a bunch of complex trade-offs for us.
This one comes from Europe. It feels like ADCs have taken over the game recently, and now I have to play them mid. Is this going to get changed anytime soon?
So we made some changes to ADCs at the start of Split 2 to try and address some long-running satisfaction problems amongst ADC players. That's had some unintended consequences though, and we've seen ADCs get a lot more play and high MMR and pro play in other lanes. We've got some changes in flight right now that should be live by the time you see this video in 14.15 and 14.16 to bring their power back down. This is one of those cases where what we're looking to achieve and what we actually achieved didn't quite line up, unfortunately. But as with all these sort of situations, if we miss the mark on something, we'll go back, keep working on it, try and stick the landing better. So, from players in China, it feels like my games are decided by how many fill players there are, especially in Diamond Plus. Are there plans to make autofill players on each team equal?
We care that when you load in, both teams feel like they have an equal chance of winning. So by the time you're hearing this message, we'll have shipped changes in mid-August that should better balance the amount of auto-filled and secondary players in each team. Now, matchmaking is something we saw a lot of questions on, so we'll do a deeper dive in our next dev update.
Okay, it's too bad that they're, unfortunately, it sounds like this dev update is not super, like they said at the beginning. Unfortunately, it's just not filled with that much new information or new changes. So curious about what they're going to say next time. But it really doesn't make sense that they don't just appropriately match fill versus fill. And the reason for this is because, of course, queue times would be the problem. The issue with this is how do you can balance the matchmaking as precisely as you want, but the issue is that people would have to wait in queue for a very, very long time. So what they need to think about doing is, can we make these changes, right? What kind of effect would it have on queue times? And the problem that I don't understand is that we know that there are plenty of games where they have an autofill player, on a team, and it doesn't make any sense, right? Like you'll have situations very clearly we've seen where somebody will be autofilled when they don't need to be autofilled, They'll autofill two people on a team or give them secondary role, and they could just swap their positions with each other and they would be fine. And in some cases, like if you see people trading in champion select, the other person doesn't actually main the role, or they queued up for something else. But there are actually just straight up cases, that people have documented where everyone queued up for a different role, and then two players or three players on their team were just kind of put into different positions. That just should never happen, so they just need to fix that outright. And then especially for high impact roles like number 1 jungle and number 2 support, there is absolutely no reason why you should have an autofill jungler versus a non-autofill jungler, or an autofill support versus a non-autofill support. And when we're talking about just making sure that that happens with, let's say, just start with jungle, right? Let's just say that we make sure that jungle is always either autofill versus autofill or on-roll versus on-roll. If you make sure that that happens, then you're going to not impact queue times, I would imagine, a crazy amount, because it's not like you're ensuring that every autofill player is always matched against an autofill player. You're just ensuring it for that one role that has the biggest negative ramifications on a game if a player's filled. We've all been there. It's super frustrating. It's not fun for the person who who gets put in jungle. Dodging's not fun either, and people kind of forced to dodge when they're in these situations. Really, it's a autofill is like a problem of there not being enough players on the server. And well, obviously Riot wants there to be as many players as possible, and in theory they're not trying to kill their player base, and there's nothing that they can do to magically double the number of players playing tomorrow, so that autofill has to be less prevalent, or can be less prevalent without affecting queue times. Obviously it's systemic, leading from the fact that there just aren't enough people playing the game anymore. So we're going to see autofill more and more and more, especially in NA specifically, where we have really the lowest player base of any major region. So, that's number 1 for autofills. It should look, the only reason why they won't be doing this is that they truly believe that their data behind the scenes is telling them that autofill is going to, matching autofill versus autofill in every role, or making sure that there's the same number of autofills on every team, is going to hurt queue times too much. And so that's the only reason why they wouldn't do it, essentially. Or maybe they're having a hard time implementing it, but it's on the way, something like that, right? Now, they did announce in this last patch that they were going to make improvements to autofill, which they just mentioned here, that are actually going to be shipping the next patch because they weren't ready, that are going to try to ensure that autofill players are matched versus autofill players, not in the same role, but at least, more frequently. And this is already supposed to be a thing, but autofill players are supposed to be more likely in this coming patch to match versus autofill players on the other team. Again, not in the same role, but if there's one autofill player on one team, it's supposed to be more likely that there's one autofill player on the other team. Or if there's 2 autofill players on one team, more likely that there should be 2 autofill players on the other team. If there's somebody getting secondary role, they're treating that almost like autofill, which is good, because essentially, even the terminology, right? Like, I think a lot of times you don't really hear people say like, oh, I got secondary role, or whatever. Like, if you're a support player or whatever role you play and you get mid secondary, you're like, oh, I'm autofilled. Even though, of course, getting your secondary role is different than getting autofilled. So that being said, the problem is, even with the changes that they're going to make, why is it most, right? Why is it most of the time you're going to be matching against another autofill? And how specific can we get it? Especially, obviously, if they could, right, without really hurting queue times, they probably would just come out and say, yeah, we're going to make sure that every game, if you're autofill top, you're versus an autofill top. If you're, autofilled mid versus an autofill mid, et cetera, in every role, every game, same number of autofills in the same roles, so it's just fair. The difficulty with that is that I guess you run into a couple of problems, which is one, autofill will actually become maybe more frequent because they'll have these games where they have a group of people to put together and they have one player who is, in fact, maybe this is the case now for why people get filled like that, but you have like one player on the other team who's filled top, but you have an actual top laner. So rather than giving that team, the top laner versus the autofilled top laner, they autofilled the top laner, to mid, and they put their mid laner top, and now they're doing all kinds of shenanigans in order to make sure that it's balanced out. So maybe there's some problems there, but they could at least explain, what's going on there with those issues. So that's number one. So these changes that they're shipping in the next patch sound like they're just going to make it more likely if you've got an autofill to get the same number of autofills on the other team. They actually didn't even say same number. They just said, if you've got an autofill, they're more likely to have an autofill. So you still might, of course, plus it's most of the time, you still might see games where, it's 2 autofills versus 1, or games where you have an autofilled jungler, but they have like an autofilled, mid or ADC or something like that. It's really frustrating that they can't do that, and that for such a popular game, we can't see these kind of changes implemented. Yeah.
From Brazil, can you bring back honor opponents?
I mean, short answer, yes. In September, you'll be able to honor opponents again, and you'll be able to honor multiple teammates. We're making some other changes to the honor system as well. We'll talk about those more soon. Okay, next up we got a question from a player in LATAM.
That's kind of interesting.
Are you doing anything to fix people entering my games?
Not you specifically, Andre, but for everybody else on the planet, we definitely want to make changes here because it sucks when it happens to us too. It's a difficult space to get right, but we're making some changes to our detection systems to improve this. We'll have to focus more on a total set of behaviors across more games and things like selling items to buy fairy charms, wasting ult on cooldown, report rate over many games. We're gonna have to study a lot. This work is still ongoing, but we are optimistic that it should have a much higher success rate of detecting griefers. So we're expecting to trial this in the next few months. We also have a devlog that's out now that goes into more detail on both the honor system and our improved griefing detection, so stay tuned. All right, so this next question...
I want to say something real quick about that. I don't doubt that they're working on it, but especially if you've been around as long as I have, Riot has been saying the same exact thing for like 10 years. And so, look, I 100% believe that they do have people actively working on it. They've probably been working on it for 10 years. But, and they've shipped changes and, in theory, improvements to it and stuff like that over the years. So I don't doubt what they're saying, right? Like, obviously, I believe what they're saying. But you have to understand that when you've got a problem, and it's a pretty severe problem, and they're saying the same thing over and over again, year after year after year, without fixing the problem, that's pretty frustrating, right? And overall, we move in a positive direction. Things get a little bit better. But, it is a little bit disappointing when you hear them saying the same thing over and over again, because the first time you hear it, you're like, wow, this is great. I'm super happy that they're working on this. And then the third and the fourth and the fifth time, you're like, okay, they don't really mean what, they're just saying that they're working on it. Like, what are they actually doing? Show us some real changes, etc. So,
question comes from Southeast Asia. My friends who are new to League are placed too high. They lose a lot, they get flamed, and they don't want to play. What are you doing to fix this?
It's a big problem.
Okay, so there's 3 things we're working on right now. The first is Vanguard removing bots has made it so the matchmaking system gets much better data about how new players are actually doing, because they're not getting matched against or compared to bots when their skill is being calculated.
Right, so this is really important. We've been talking about this, right? Again, the more bots that they get rid of, who are like literal bots playing ranked, especially to like D-rank accounts to Iron 4 and stuff like that, because high elo players, for whatever reason, really love buying like Iron 4 accounts so that they can do like Iron 4 to Challenger challenges, or, like be able to win 100 games in a row on Teemo or something like that, because they're starting at such a low point, that they don't get to a rank where it's very difficult for them to win until like way later on in their climb. So there were bots not just leveling accounts and then selling them, as level 30 accounts for people to play in ranked, but also bots actually actively playing ranked. And the problem is that when you have this skill-based distribution and you have a lot of new players who are coming into the game, the system is essentially thinking that they're better than this 5% of the player base that doesn't really exist, right? And so it's bumping them a little bit higher than it should. And that's why, as I said, when Riot banned those 50,000 bots, I think it caused a bit of a pullback in the distribution, which is probably, a good thing long term. But you hate to see any sort of random third-party event like that greatly affect people's rank. And so compared to, we just went over it the other day, like my gradual climb through League, starting in Season 3, was a very, very nice climb, right? Like, I got stuck when I definitely deserved to be stuck. And when I was playing through lower ranks in like Season 3, Season 4, Season 5, there weren't these crazy changes that were like bumping my rank way up or bumping my rank way down. I had plenty of time to climb because there was one split a year instead of 3. It's a different environment today where all of the sudden Riot shifts the rank distribution and a gold player gets bumped up to emerald or plat. And now they're finding themselves demoting because they're also matched artificially based on their face rank instead of just on their MMR. So they're not playing only versus other gold players in plat and emerald. They're playing versus previous plat players, in some cases a lot of previous diamond players, even from like low diamond, especially if they were in emerald. They're losing those games, having a really hard time climbing. They're demoting down. They're getting rid of bot accounts that make up a huge percentage of the player base. Now all of a sudden people are demoting down. And then people who are spending a lot of time playing and improving at the game are feeling like super disappointed because they're playing the same as they've always played, or they're even improving a little bit, but their rank is now drastically lower than it was because it had inflated up and now it's going back down. And again, with my own personal experience, even back in Season 2, Season 3, I had a friend who duoed all of his placement games with someone who was doing pretty well, and he ended up getting placed just in like Silver 3 or something like that, back when all of the rest of us were being placed in like Bronze 3 or Bronze 4, which is the lowest you could be. Well, not the low. There was Bronze 5 back then. So he ended up losing. He went something like 1-17 or maybe like 3-19 or something like that on his first 20 ranked games, demoting, all the way from Silver back to Bronze 1 because he was placed too high. And you know what happened? He quit the game because who wants to play a game where you're just getting absolutely destroyed? And there's no hope. There's just no hope of you like getting better and winning games or whatever. You're just tanking over and over and over again. And especially for maybe a newer player who's not willing to play as much, to have to play, 20 losing games in a row or something like that just to get to a rank where you're able to compete and have fair games felt really, really bad for him. And we see something similar happening recently where a lot of new accounts are getting placed pretty high up because it's kind of assumed that they're probably Smurfs, or something like this is going on with the normal MMR, or it was not calibrated quite right. And so a lot of players were creating new accounts and getting those accounts placed in Platinum or Emerald, even though they were legitimately like Silver or Gold on their main account. Those players won't stay in Emerald or Platinum forever, though. The more games they play on those accounts, the more they will just lose, more than 50% of their games and demote down. So now they have this really weird feeling where they're like, I invested a ton of time and effort into my main account, and yet it's lower rank than this other account. So now I care more about this other account. And what was the point of the climb that I went through? Where is the meaning from achieving that rank? Really, these artificial shifts upwards and downwards because of these external factors are something that I didn't have to deal with when I was climbing. And I think that they're really bad for the game because players don't understand why they're happening. They undermine faith and integrity in the rank system. And in general, they just erode the player's experience, with the game when all of the sudden they just achieve a rank out of nowhere and they want to feel like, it's their own because of their own volition, but really it's just because Riot shifted the distribution and now they're upper rank, or, they want to know that they're demoting because they're playing worse, not just demote a rank because when the distribution was shifted upward, they were shifted upwards a little bit too high, and then they banned bot accounts, which brought them back down a little bit, and then there were lots of resets and they're not playing enough and stuff like that. So it's all very tedious. So yeah, this is really important that they get this right.
Second, for new players to ranked, we recently added a 10 normal SR game requirement to all accounts before they're allowed to play ranked at all.
Yeah, see, this is a problem. I don't think that new players, like they're just pointing to stuff, and they do this all the time. They just did it with the other thing. Like instead of talking about a future change that they have planned, they're just reminding people that they had already done something. Requiring 10 normal games is a step in the right direction, but almost every player who is a legitimate new player is not going to level all the way to level 30 with bots. The only people who are leveling all the way to level 30 with bots are bots who are playing bot games in order to get to level 30 and sell the account, or Smurfs who do not want their normal game MMR to impact their rank placement, so they were exclusively playing only bot games to level 30 so that they could get that silver placement instead of getting placed in like platinum, so that they could either again climb from a low starting point to have a higher win rate and stuff like that, or and maybe help boost the MMR a little bit on the account, or players who are trying to show like, here we're smurfing to show that you can get out of your rank if you're good enough type of thing, like consistently. And so they want to show people what it's like to start from like a silver placement rather than from like a platinum placement or something like that. I imagine that 99% of new players playing the game are not leveling all the way to level 30 bots only, and then hopping into ranked right before they've played any normal games. That's probably a very small percentage of people. So this change actually does nothing for new players.
That gives us a lot more data on how players' skill will actually...
Oh, you know what, though? They're a little bit right. It does help if a new player is getting placed into silver or something like that, because there won't be as many Smurf accounts playing against them as in silver. So, for example, if you're a new player, you're playing your placements in silver or something like that, you're starting out around there will be less Smurf accounts down in that rank, because the vast majority of Smurf accounts now forced to play those 10 normal games unless they int those 10 normal games or purposefully do bad in them, which I don't think a lot of people are willing to do. You have to understand most Smurfs are just trying to climb as high as they can, as quickly as they can, or are not going to even pay attention to how this works, and they're just going to stomp their 10 normal games. And that's going to take a lot of accounts and put them instantly much higher up, gold, platinum, plus. So there will be less games of ranked played by Smurf accounts. And that is a good thing. That is a step in the right direction. And that even helps newer players who are either playing their placements in silver and are now able to avoid most of the Smurfs, or players who are legitimately in like bronze and silver, who might run into those Smurf accounts at the start of those Smurf accounts climb, but now don't have to run into those accounts. Now, of course, if you're a platinum player, is this going to be bad for you? Not really, because they'd have to, if they're platinum or above, they'd climb through your rank anyways, so you're kind of stuck playing against them no matter what, whether they start in silver or whether they start in your rank.
Perform there, rather than just comparing them to how they did in ARAMs or RGMs or whatever. And then third, we're also currently working on more improvements to how we detect Smurfs in general, so that they're placed more accurately. Here we've got a question from, well, actually a lot of players all over.
So, this is another thing too. So again, they're working on a lot of systems to detect Smurfs and make sure they're placed more accurately. We've talked about True Skill 2 and how that's going to attempt to use, all of the data that they essentially have at their disposal, in order to allow them to place and rank up Smurfs quicker, so that they can essentially, right now, if you've got a Smurf, even with the 10 normal games, if you've only got 10 games of win and loss data, and then they play their ranked placement games, and you've maybe got, in the beginning of their climb, you've got 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 games to go off of. How do you accurately place a Smurf off of that little win and loss data? And what True Skill 2 is going to attempt to do, right, is they're going to take that other data, such as how a player is performing, kills, stats, things like that. It's going to take that stuff into account. And, if you're interested in more detailed explanation, there is a video on True Skill 2, or how Riot changed the rank system without telling us, that kind of goes into detail on this system that they're working on implementing by the end of the year. But essentially, that system is going to help to identify Smurfs better. But what I want to say about this is, it really sounds like Riot is way more intent on working on a ton of systems. They're spending a lot of time, obviously a lot of money, investing into figuring out how to place Smurfs higher faster, without catching new players or lower ranked players, and then accidentally placing their account way too high. And what is, I guess, kind of disappointing about that is, like I've talked about, even as somebody who's like Masters GM myself, I really think that Riot should lean more towards like getting rid of smurfing or banning smurfing, and we'll probably talk about that more in detail in another video. But the fact that they're investing so much time and money into keeping smurfing around, but being able to place them quicker to mitigate the damage that it's doing to low elo, but not actually outright fixing the problem, is a bit of a concern, right? Like that kind of sucks. So, I don't know how to feel about that, because I really think that the impact that Smurfs are having on the game is problematic, to say the least, for low elo players who are trying to climb. I recognize 100%, and again, we'll get more into it another time, since we're just trying to get through this video, but 100% for me, right? When I was climbing in Season 3, there just weren't as many Smurf accounts. There weren't as many Smurfs. It wasn't as cheap or as easy to go and find and buy Smurf accounts online. And so I think that the problem has gotten a lot worse. And without any data on how many accounts are actually Smurfs, how many people are actually Smurfing, it's hard to just be not concerned about the problem, right? Because of that. So that's a big issue.
All over the place. Did Vanguard actually stop botting in League like you said it would? Is Vanguard working?
All right, the short answer is yes, and let me hit you with some stats. Ranked scripting fell below 1% for the first time in 4 years. Only 1 in 200 ranked games has a scripter, and we have seen very few false positives, but several cases of accounts being stolen or shared with cheaters. Now, cheaters are running out of accounts, so please don't give them yours.
Side note here, if you haven't already enabled email multi-factor authentication, please do. That'll really help prevent this. It'll help you a lot.
There have been some integration bugs, mainly with old or vulnerable drivers or certificates, and we have seen issues with leaving your client running for long periods of time or launching on 2 machines. This can cause issues with Vanguard, and we're working to make sure these issues don't happen again. We haven't seen any Vanguard cause problems with boot looping or bricking machines, but let us know if you experienced it. The biggest complaint we are seeing is, why does this have to run from boot? Microsoft is making some changes to Windows, so we may get to a point where Vanguard may not have to do this in the future. We'll see how this goes and give you an update as soon as we can. We're starting to see bad actors move to Mac, so Mac Vanguard should be coming soon. You can read about that and more today in our dev blog made by our Wizardly Vanguard team.
Next we have a question from a player in North America. Do you have an update on the Champion Mastery emotes that you promised you'd be updating?
We do.
What I don't really like about their answer is that, and they've done a huge job with banning botted accounts and accounts that are, bots playing in ranked. However, what I will say is that Riot, especially with scripters, and I imagine they still do this with Vanguard, Vanguard is there to help detect, but they let them go on for a long time in order to ban them in batches, which is fine, right? Like, it sounds bad, but it's actually fine. It's a way for them to like study what's going on, fix the problem so it can never happen again, and then ban them all in a gigantic wave. It's a smart way to approach the situation, right? There's no way around it. It's better than to just immediately ban anyone that they detect instantly, and not be able to study and solve the problem. Now, that being said, what I worry about is the question was, what is not anything to do with scripting really. What is Riot doing to ban bot accounts? Because we heard about that initial wave that they banned in the beginning, but we haven't really heard anything since. So we've got Vanguard. What is it doing? Sounds like they're doing a good job with banning waves of scripters and fixing some of the problems. There's some maybe obvious stuff like he just mentioned they're even willing to say, like people just being able to play on Mac without Vanguard, which is, I mean, that's pretty funny. But obviously they just haven't finished the Mac Vanguard version yet. So, better late than never. But, so it is a little bit funny that a scripter could just switch to a Mac and then be able to do the same thing. But regardless, since the question was about banning bot accounts, I would have liked to hear if they have, a wave of bans planned, if they've banned any more bot accounts since the initial 50,000. The other thing was, and maybe I should do a little bit more research into this, I really wanted to know, was the initial 50,000 bot accounts banned, how many of those accounts were ranked? What servers were they on? Was that across all servers? Because it makes a big difference. A lot of us have been, when we're talking about like this shift in the rank distribution backwards, for lower ranked players, as a result of getting rid of those fake accounts at the bottom of the ladder, resulting in players having to shift backwards to fill those spots, the void like we've talked about. In order to calculate what kind of an effect that's having, it would be really helpful to know, because if it's 50,000 bot accounts globally across all of the servers, and a very small percentage of those were in NA, and a very small percentage of those, some of those bot accounts that they were talking about are just like accounts that were botted to level 30, which would probably be the majority, and only a tiny percentage were accounts that were actually playing ranked, in iron or in bronze or something like that. That's really important information to know, because it may be the case that there isn't a big pullback effect from banning those bot accounts, because very few of them were actually playing ranked in iron and bronze and NA. That's totally possible. We just don't know. So that's just kind of a theory right now, because we don't have the information on that. So I'd love to know, if they've actually done any more with banning bots since the initial thing, or if they're, what's going on, right? It doesn't really answer that part of the question.
We've gone through a few explorations, but we've landed on this. Now, our goal was to respect the previous design players' love while figuring out a way to make them look different and updated. We want to get your feedback on this new version.
Look,
so please...
I'm not a big mastery guy or whatever. Well, maybe I am, because I'm obviously a Braum one trick, and I have I think I actually just hit 3 million points on Braum. I didn't even realize. But the new mastery system sucks. The old one was way, way better, even though it capped out at 7, right? It's like you have an initial feel for how good you are at the champion, and it's easy to feel like you've completed that once you've gotten that champion to mastery level 7. And then once you have a champion mastery level 7 and you're playing a champion for years and years and years, you're going based on the number of mastery points that you have, right? I've got 1 million points. I've got 200,000 points, or I've got 3 million points because I am a complete degenerate, right? Like you go based off of that. But if that's, not really, and you can see your points like that, I guess, still. So maybe it's not too bad. But, as someone who's not really just kind of casually observing the mastery system, I think it kind of blows compared to the old system. Mostly just the visual effects just really don't look good compared to the old system at all. It was very clear, what mastery level someone was when they flashed it, or not what level they are. Actually, that's kind of more clear when it literally says the number. But it was like very visually nice to spam your mastery emote, and it just doesn't hit the same anymore. I don't know what to tell you.
Please do let us know what you think.
So they're just asking for feedback on it. Maybe they're still open to changing it, but no plans announced.
All right, Andre, here comes another question from players in Oceania, which I believe you're familiar with, yes? Okay, why do you force champions into existing thematics?
So a lot goes into the process of selecting what theme we're going to use for champion skins. Sometimes that's an existing thematic that players really want to see a champion in. Sometimes that's particular aspects of a champion's personality or whatever. But we are going through a bit of an update right now where we're going to put less focus on existing skin lines, as our starting point at least, and a bit more focus on, hey, what does this particular champion need from a new skin? So we're going to look more at their portfolio, figure out...
Yeah, this is so true, actually. Like, I mean, I don't know. There have been a few skin lines that obviously, like, for most players, I've really liked, but at the end of the day, are people really going out and buying like the whole skin line for a bunch of champions and roles they don't even play and stuff like that? Maybe I don't understand. But back in the day, as an old school player, again, back in season 3 and stuff like that, I feel like almost all of the skins, very different approach, right? Almost all of the skins were just a unique one-off skin that really fit that character well or did something fun with that champion. And I feel like all of the skins nowadays are in a skin line, right? Where it's like the champion has to fit that skin line, or, for a couple of champions that were being made as a part of that skin line, right? They were being picked because of their popularity, even though they didn't fit the skin line that well, or they needed a 5th champion or something. And so they put this champion into the skin line and didn't fit it super well. It's kind of weird. And I think that they could have a much more balanced approach, right? Like, obviously people do like certain skin lines and they become really nice. And I'm sure that some people do go out and buy a bundle with all of the skins for that skin line in it or whatever. But I would say, definitely more of a 50-50 approach between having a lot of cool individual skins that fit a champion really well and having like a skin line that people might buy all of the skins as a bundle. I think that would be much better because they're missing out on a lot of opportunity, I think, with individual skins. I mean, I can't think of the last time they even did an individual skin, that wasn't a part of a skin line. And all of the best individual skins I can think of from the last like 5 years maybe are actually like, the third-party skin creators or whatever doing stuff that I've seen around, even for champions I don't play. So, that's obviously like a missed opportunity, but
figure out what they're lacking.
It is
Whether
what it
that's
is.
skins that really closely align with their base existing theme, or things that actually take aspects of their personality in ways that work but really reinvent them. Like, what if Azir was a practitioner of the law? We want to have that wide range of vibes and just like feel for these skins in ways that still make sense for the champion they are. Sometimes that means, you'll get things like the B skin line. Sometimes that'll mean things like, Rain Shepherd to really enhance existing champion fantasies. If you want to hear more about how we choose skins, we've got a dev blog out now that goes into a lot more detail. And to spoil some stuff from it, the upcoming prestige skin list is Zeri, Diana, Swain, and Caitlyn.
Okay, so this one comes from everyone. When are you going to delete Yumi?
Yeah, so we're not going to...
hold on. Wait, they're going to do a prestige Swain. That's going to be interesting. That's not a champion I would have... I mean, look, have fun Swain mains, but that's a funny champion to pick. I wouldn't think of that one as having a prestige skin. When are they going to delete Yumi? Well, let's just hear their answer. That's a good question.
We're going to be doing that. We're going to be adding Yumi's sister, Tumi, instead. Tumi will have 2 books. Will be permanently attached. Will have double crit. Will have a 3-hit, a 4-hit, and a 5-hit passive. Multiple dashes. Global ults. Yes, multiple global ults. Can transform into Lisa and has his entire kit when she needs it. And is also Yasuo and Yone's sister. Alright, that's all we have for today. Let us know if you like this format, and we'll try it again sometime.
Honestly though, if people are still like, I don't know, we can take a look at Yumi's win rate or something like that. If people are still seriously asking though about like them removing Yone, should they, or not Yone, sorry, removing Yumi, should they not actually kind of take, like, I get they're trying to, it's Riot trying to be funny again, but could we not actually answer the question of like why Yumi's design is so unfun that even she's sitting at a 47% win rate and people are still asking for her to be removed from the game? We might need to do something. Yeah, good luck, Riot. Okay, so that's the That's the dev blog. Again, not much in there, to be honest with you. They didn't really announce much that's new. They kind of said that they're working on some generic stuff that they're always working on, and they, they said they're going to release a lot of information in the next dev blog, which I think is once a month. It sounds like. I actually don't know, but it sounds like they're about once a month now. So the next one will be quite interesting. So that's going to be important. A lot of changes to matchmaking and ranked and stuff like that they're going to be talking about in the next one. So with that being said, the thing that I wanted to talk about, which they didn't really touch on at all, but I guess kind of relates most to the question about them helping new players, is not just helping new players in ranked, but helping new players in normal games. And for me, one of the things that I don't really understand or I think should be changed is they're using normal games to impact your ranked placements, right? So that they can get a better idea of how skilled you are and doing a better job of matching you in ranked. I think the reverse needs to be true. And I'll explain why that's not problematic, and leading to like some sort of bad feedback loop. But I think that for, current existing accounts, right, that your rank in ranked and how high your MMR is there should translate into normal games. Because a lot of times, especially for a player like me, again, I'm like borderline between like Master GM, like 460 LP right now. For me, when I go play normal games with my friends, it's a weird experience because if I'm trying and playing on roll, we basically can't lose because I'm like giga smurfing in normal games. I'm somebody who's played a ton of normal games. I think I've actually got about 4,000 normal games played, if you can believe that, over the years. I have been playing since season 2 or season 3, though, normal games. So I've played about 4,000 normal games, maybe 3,800. And I've got nearly a 50% win rate. Because a lot of times, right, those normal games are from a long time ago when I wasn't as good at the game, or I was going into normal games and kind of trolling and having some fun, or playing with friends for fun, or playing other champions and other roles that I wasn't familiar with, right? So as a result, my normal MMR is a lot lower than it should be probably. And so this creates kind of a difficult conundrum, which is if I go into normal games, especially with where I'm at now as a player, my normal game MMR is still going to be pretty low because I don't play it that much, especially in the last 5 years or so as I focus more on ranked. But my MMR is super low in normals, but super high in ranked. So it doesn't really make sense to me that there's no at least slight adjustment to my normal game MMR to reflect the fact that I'm like a master or GM player. And so I've actually heard from a lot of people complaining that like one of the reasons why they even bothered to play ranked in the first place is because normal games matchmaking is so bad, and they'll like get these games where there's a master player on the other team and it's completely, not balanced out by a master player on their team. And it's really problematic because you're taking this mode where like new or casual players are suddenly forced to play against like really good players. And it doesn't even have to be like, there aren't that many of us in Masters Plus, but it doesn't even have to just be Masters Plus. Like you take a diamond player who hasn't played normal games since they were grinding to level 30, or hasn't played normal games in a couple of years, and since then they've improved from being like a silver or gold player all the way to being like a diamond or an emerald player or something like that. These players, when they play normal games, are going to really screw up the matchmaking when they go to play with their friends every once in a while until they've played enough normal games to for their normal game MMR to reflect that. And it's really problematic. So I think that they should take your ranked MMR into account, even if it's not all the way, but it's just a partial adjustment to your normal game MMR. I think that would be really a big improvement for casual players so that they don't find themselves playing such unbalanced games versus me or other high elo players when we match against each other. Now, another thing related to that is, so wouldn't this create like kind of a negative feedback loop with normal games, as they talked about, impacting your ranked placement on a new account? And but yet your ranked MMR is impacting your normal game MMR. And here's what's fine about that is you don't get to have your ranked MMR until after your normal games that you played to impact your ranked MMR have already occurred. So if you don't understand like the way that normal games impacting your ranked placements work, they only impact your ranked placement on an account that's never played ranked before. Not an account that's playing their new ranked placements for a new split or a new year. Not an account that was already ranked before that was changed or anything like that. Just if you're on a new account, you play normal games, your normal game MMR will affect your ranked placement. So that means a couple of things. For an account like mine or anybody else's that's been ranked for years and years and years, our normal game MMR, like how I do in my normal games, has no impact on my ranked. And how I do in ranked has no impact on my normal games. So actually you could have it so that my ranked MMR impacts my normal game MMR without it changing anything. And that would allow fairer matchmaking in normal games so that you're not matching against these higher ranked players all the time in normals. On the other hand, right, if you have a newer account that is unranked, you don't have any ranked MMR to impact your normal game MMR. So it's not going to affect how you do in your normal games or how high your normal game MMR is for when you go and play your ranked placements. And if you've got an account that's newer, but has already played its ranked placements, your normal games, just like for those older accounts like mine, your normal games are no longer affecting your ranked MMR at all, even if you are at like a split end and there's a reset or something like that. Your normal games don't have any more impact once you've been placed for the first time. So really no downside as far as I can see to implementing some sort of system that either uses your ranked MMR to help match normal games by adjusting your normal game MMR or something like that. It does bring up one slight problem though, which is when you go into normal games, it's often a mode, like I said, where you're trying a weird build, you're playing for fun, you're maybe intentionally picking a champion other than your main or a role other than your main, so it's not such a stomp in order to help combat these things, and also just because you're playing for fun, and you don't get to play those champions or those other things that you want to play, when you're playing ranked on your main. So, what do you do with this situation? Like, where somebody like me comes into a normal game and picks Braum versus coming into a normal game and picking, I don't know, like Gnar top or something like that. And there's going to be a big difference in how I do if I go into a normal game and pick my main champion, or, I'm playing with a friend who's playing AD carry and they want me to play support for them, versus if I go into a normal game and play some random role and some random champion with a troll build or something like that. And how do you account for that? Very difficult to do. And so one difficulty of doing something like this is that if I was matched against another master player in a normal game who is like on roll tryharding, and I'm like off roll playing for fun or learning another champion, that's a difficulty that you can't really fix unless you had like some sort of role based or champion based MMR, which is something that in general, totally different change, maybe would even apply to ranked, but I think could be a good thing for the game if people had less reason to smurf again, because most of the reason why people go to smurf, people I think in lower ranks don't understand this. A lot of high elo players don't go to play on a smurf account just to stomp low elo players. They really don't. Some people do, some people enjoy that, but I think the vast majority of people who are making smurf accounts and climbing up are either learning a new role, want to get another account to their main rank so they can practice other champions at their peak, or at their highest level, so that they can then transition to playing those champions on their main. Or to do some sort of challenge, but their goal is to instantly rank up as fast as possible, and things like that, right? A lot of players are not just going into low ranks just to stomp low ranked players. So, but anyways, with that being said, right, you disincentivize a lot of the reason for why people smurf then if you had a rank for each champion, because I could play AD carry and learn it on my main account without having to go on a smurf account and start in silver to play AD carry. Or whatever. And so that would help actually disincentivize a lot of smurfing. And having a champion-based MMR system could also apply to normals, would definitely help with people like me going into a normal game and just playing for fun with friends on a champion I'm not used to playing, versus if I'm going into normal games and playing a champion that, I'm like one of the best at. That would be pretty bad. So, hope that Riot takes some of these suggestions into account. We'll see what happens with the next dev blog next month. Sounds like it's going to be a lot more meaty. Until next time, good luck in solo queue and have a wonderful day.